The sky had forgotten how to sleep. At 11 at night, the sun still hovered over the Norwegian fjord, turning the world gold and rose. Elena stood on the dock outside her rented cabin, listening to the quiet she had come here to find. 3 weeks away from Oslo, away from expectations, away from a life she no longer recognized. Then she heard the oars. A small rowboat moved across the glowing water. The man in it, dark-haired, calm, almost part of the landscape, paused when he saw her. "Sorry," he called in Norwegian. "Didn't know anyone was staying here." "I could say the same," Elena replied, surprised by the steadiness of her voice. He reached the dock and climbed out. His eyes were the color of the fjord, gray, blue, green all at once. Paint stained his fingers. "I'm Magnus. I stay across the inlet. I come here to paint when the light doesn't die." "Elena, me a composer? Or trying to be again?" Something in his expression softened, as if he understood that kind of lostness. "The midnight sun can help," he said. "It wipes away the old rhythms." They talked while the sun traced its eternal circle. He told her about growing up here, leaving for success, and losing his sense of color. She spoke of music that had dried up somewhere between applause and emptiness. "Want to see what I'm working on?" he asked, shy beneath the confidence. She agreed. He rowed her across the fjord, his hands steady, careful. His cabin was small and cluttered with canvases, but he led her straight to one. On the easel was the fjord transformed, alive with galaxies and impossible colors. "It's unfinished," he murmured. "Something's missing." "It's not missing," Elena whispered. "It's waiting." He looked at her then, really looked, and something unspoken pulsed between them. The days, or the endless light that replaced days, fell into a quiet rhythm. Magnus rode over each evening that wasn't evening. They walked mountain paths, talked about the strange ache of creation, and shared pieces of themselves they'd forgotten how to voice. He mixed colors for her. She hummed melodies returning like timid birds. One luminous night, they climbed to a peak overlooking the fjord. The sun glowed at the edge of the world. They lay on a blanket, shoulders touching. "I'm afraid," Elena said. "Afraid I used up all my music." Magnus turned to her, his voice low. "You didn't burn out. You just held your breath too long. Sometimes someone has to remind us it's safe to breathe." Their fingers intertwined. Tears warmed her eyes. Thaw, not sorrow. "Magnus," she whispered. He tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I haven't painted anything real in years," he admitted. "Until the moment I saw you on that dock." "Then paint this," she breathed. "Paint us." He kissed her gently, then deeper, warm and steady. When they pulled apart, the sun had barely shifted, but everything inside her had. The remaining weeks were a duet. He painted, she composed. His work grew bold and luminous again. Her music flowed, no longer controlled but alive. On her last day, he appeared at her door with a canvas wrapped in cloth. "I finished it," he said, voice uncertain. He unwrapped it. The fjord glowed in impossible colors, but now two silhouettes stood on the shore, reaching toward each other, the space between them lit with every color he could find. "Elena, come back. Or I'll come to you. I don't care where as long as." She kissed him quiet. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, smiling through tears. "Not without you." They stood together as the midnight sun traced its endless circle. Autumn would come. Darkness would return. But they had found something brighter. Love that didn't need perfect conditions. Love that made its own light. And Elena finally understood. She hadn't lost her music. She had simply been waiting for someone to remind her that the most beautiful songs are the ones we don't have to sing alone. As the fjord whispered its ancient lullaby and the mountains kept watch, two hearts finally found their rhythm, steady, certain, and at peace. The next morning the light was softer, still unending but gentler, as if the sky itself knew something had changed. Elena woke to the smell of coffee and the low hum of a familiar voice. Magnus was in her kitchen, barefoot, wearing a shirt she suspected he'd pulled on in a hurry. His hair was a little wild, his presence warm enough to fill the whole cabin. "You sleep like someone who finally stopped fighting," he said as she walked in. "And you make coffee like someone who's afraid I'll run away if left alone too long." He chuckled, but there was truth in his eyes. "I just don't want to waste a second." They drank their coffee on the dock. The water was smooth as brushed silver, the mountains rising like ancient guardians around them. Magnus rested his arm lightly behind her on the railing, not quite touching her but close enough that she felt the heat of him. It was a quiet morning, quiet but full. "What happens now?" she asked. Magnus looked at her carefully, like he was studying a canvas before the first stroke of paint. "Now," he said, "we figure out a life that doesn't end when the summer does." She smiled. "That sounds complicated. Good things usually are." They took the boat out after breakfast, not to his cabin or hers, but to the far side of the fjord where the cliffs opened into a valley lush with wildflowers. The air smelled of pine and cold water and something new. Elena watched him row, admiring the quiet strength in every movement. He wasn't performing. He simply was. And God, she loved that simplicity. They walked a narrow path along the river, the sound of rushing water brushing against their silence. Elena kept stealing glances at him, at the faint flecks of paint still clinging to his forearms, at the soft concentration on his face as he looked out over the land he loved. "You don't realize it," Magnus said suddenly, "but you hum when you're happy." "I do. It's faint. Like you're tuning the world." Her cheeks warmed. For months, years, she had felt empty of sound, of inspiration. Yet here she was, humming without thinking, breathing without effort. They found a patch of grass beneath a towering birch, its white bark glowing in the endless daylight. Magnus lay back with his hands behind his head, eyes half closed. Elena sat beside him, knees drawn to her chest. "You know," he said, "I used to dread the light." "That's surprising. You worship it." He shook his head. "I depended on it. Without it, I felt like I couldn't make anything real." Elena reached out, brushing her fingers over his. "And now," he said, turning his hand palm up so their fingers locked, "I think I could paint in the dark too. You changed the way I see things." The vulnerability in his voice made something inside her soften and settle. They lay there, watching the sky tilt slowly toward the horizon yet never quite falling. Time stretched, unhurried. After a while Elena spoke again. "What if we didn't wait for autumn to make decisions?" Magnus lifted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, heart thundering, "what if we start weaving our lives together now? Not when the season ends. Now." He sat up fully, studying her face, searching for hesitation. There was none. "Elena," he said, voice unsteady, "I want that more than anything. But I need to know. Are you choosing this because it's beautiful here? Or because you want me?" She cupped his cheek, her thumb brushing the faint roughness of stubble. "I want you. And I want the version of myself that exists when I'm with you. The one who can hear again. Breathe again." Magnus exhaled shakily, and the relief in his eyes was almost reverent. He leaned in, kissing her with a gentle certainty that grew deeper, stronger. His hand slipped into her hair, hers slid around his shoulders. The world brightened around them, not because the sun shifted, but because something inside them did. When they finally broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. "So," she whispered, breath warm against his lips, "what do we do first?" He grinned, a soft, boyish grin she hadn't seen before. "We make space," he said. "In my cabin. In yours. In our plans. We build something that lasts longer than the midnight sun." They stayed in the valley until the light dipped low enough to paint the mountains in molten gold. Elena hummed a melody she didn't recognize. New, fragile, forming itself note by note. Magnus listened with the quiet awe of someone witnessing a miracle. "Write that down," he murmured. "That one belongs to us." She smiled. "I don't need to. I won't forget it." When they rowed back across the fjord, the water glowed like liquid amber, and the world felt suspended between what had been and what could be. Magnus slowed the oars halfway across. "Elena, I want you to meet someone." "Who?" He hesitated. "My mother. She's the one person whose approval still terrifies me. But I want her to know you." Elena felt a flutter of nerves, and then surprising calm. "Then let's do it," she said. "I'm ready." Magnus beamed, the kind of smile that held future in it. And as the boat drifted back toward the dock, Elena realized she wasn't just writing music again. She was writing a life. A life with him. Life she chose. 2 days later, Elena found herself standing outside a modest cottage nestled beneath a towering pine. Her palms warm and slightly damp despite the cool northern breeze. Magnus stood beside her, his hand wrapped around hers, his thumb tracing calm little circles across her skin. "She'll love you," he whispered, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. "And if she doesn't?" Elena teased softly. "Then she'll be wrong," he replied, lifting her hand to his lips. The door opened before they could knock. A woman in her 60s stepped out, silver-streaked hair braided neatly, eyes sharp and glacier blue. Ingrid, Magnus' mother. She looked at Elena first, then at their joined hands, then at Magnus. Something unreadable flickered in her expression. "So," Ingrid said in a voice that was both cool and warm, like snow melting on sunlit stone. "This is the woman who makes my son paint like a madman again." Magnus flushed. "Mama." But Ingrid was already stepping forward. To Elena's surprise, she took both her hands in a firm grip. "Welcome," she said. "Any person who brings color back into my son's life is welcome." Elena exhaled. She hadn't even realized she'd been holding her breath. Inside, the cottage smelled of warm bread, pine resin, and old books. Everything about it felt lived in and loved. Ingrid poured tea for them, watching Elena over the rim of her mug with a shrewd, assessing gaze. "So you're a composer," she said. "Magnus tells me you here again." Elena blinked. "Here." "The world," Ingrid said simply. Elena nodded slowly. "I suppose I do." Ingrid smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "Good. The world is far too quiet when artists go silent." They talked, about Oslo, about the fjord, about music and painting and the strange magic of the midnight sun. Magnus relaxed more with each passing minute, the tension in his shoulders easing. Elena could feel the shift. Approval wasn't just given, it was woven gently into the air between them. After lunch, Ingrid sent them back outside with a small basket of pastries. "Go walk," she ordered. "Young love should not spend afternoons inside." Magnus laughed as they stepped into the sunlight. "That went better than I feared." "She loves you," Elena said. "She wants you to be happy." "And I am." His eyes softened. "With you." They walked along the path behind Ingrid's cottage, a narrow trail leading uphill through birch and wild grass. The fjord stretched below them, glittering endlessly. Elena felt impossibly full, of light, of hope, of the quiet certainty settling into her bones. Halfway up the slope, Magnus stopped. "Elena." He turned. His expression had changed. Open, unguarded, vulnerable. "I haven't felt like this in a long time," he said. "Years, maybe. I didn't think I could." She stepped closer, her fingers tracing the edge of his jaw. "You don't have to be afraid." He shook his head. "I'm not afraid of loving you. I'm afraid of not doing it well enough." Her chest tightened. "Magnus, you already love me better than I've ever been loved." He lowered his forehead to hers, breathing her in. "Then stay," he whispered. "Not just for summer. Stay longer. Let's build something real, even if we take it slowly." Elena didn't hesitate. Not even for a heartbeat. "Yes," she said. "I want that. I want you." Relief washed over him so visibly she felt it like a warm wave against her skin. He kissed her, soft at first, then with growing certainty, hands sliding around her waist, pulling her into the safety of his warmth. When they parted, she laughed, a clear, bright sound that startled birds from a nearby tree. Magnus grinned. "You're humming again." "Maybe I'm composing," she murmured. They reached the top of the slope near sunset, or what passed for sunset in the land where the sky refused to darken. The world glowed copper and rose, the mountains wearing crowns of fire. Elena sank into the grass, pulling Magnus down beside her. He lay on his back, one arm beneath his head, and pointed to the horizon. "That ridge," he said, "was the first thing I ever painted as a child. My father said it looked like a potato." Elena burst out laughing. "A potato? An angry potato?" She laughed harder, falling against his shoulder. The warmth of his amusement spread through her like summer. "I want to see all your early paintings now," she teased. "No," he groaned. "I burned the potato." She laughed again, and he watched her with a look that was almost reverent. "God, I love your laugh," he whispered. Her breath caught. She turned toward him slowly, gently. "Say that again." He cupped her cheek with his paint-roughened hand. "I love you, Elena." The world fell quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. She felt the truth rise in her like the swell of a symphony, inevitable and breathtaking. "I love you too, Magnus." He exhaled a shaky laugh, and then he kissed her with a depth that felt like a promise. The kind that rooted itself in the earth beneath them and the sky above them. When they finally drew apart, the world shimmered with possibility. "Come," Magnus said softly. "Let's go home." "Home," she echoed. He laced his fingers through hers. "Wherever we decide. But tonight, my cabin. There's a blank canvas waiting, and I think I finally know what comes next." Elena smiled, the music inside her rising like dawn. She knew too. "If you want, I can continue for